what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the RugDoc DeFi YouTube channel. And in today's video, I actually got a chance to sit down with the rug doctor herself, the owner of the pretty famous KYC company, auditing company called RugDoc. We sit down, we talk a little bit about their KYC process and also like this landscape of DeFi and crypto that we live in, where it's crazy with all these rugs happening. So I wanted to take an opportunity to bring her here on the channel, talk a little bit about what they do, again, their process, and hopefully educate you guys a little bit more than the information that you already know, and hopefully you can learn how to become or try to become a better investor in total, and just making sure that you're doing better research. So if you could drop a like on this video, I would greatly appreciate it. I have a ton of more content coming out over the next week or two with more KYC companies or companies that aren't necessarily investment platforms, but that we use very frequently all the time, right? That being said, guys, enjoy this video. All right, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the RugDoc DeFi YouTube channel. And we have a very special guest. We actually have the rug doctor herself. This is the lady behind the scenes over at RugDoc. And I brought her here on the channel just to kind of talk a little bit about their KYC process, because over the last couple of weeks, it's been kind of crazy in the DeFi space, at least, with projects just kind of disappearing and taking people's money. So I wanted to bring somebody in that space onto the channel here, so that way you guys can maybe get a good understanding of things to look out for when a project comes to light and they have KYC by maybe not so much of a popular KYC company. So welcome to the channel. Happy to have you on.
Yeah, thanks. No, thanks for having me. It's great to be here, and I'm happy to answer as many questions as I can about, like KYC scams and all of the in between.
Yeah, so I guess let's start briefly, like touching on what got you into doing this kind of stuff in the space.
Yeah, honestly, it kind of arose out of my own personal investing habit. So I don't have a background in, like really crypto at all. I have an academic science background, so I have a PhD in engineering, where I did do a good amount of programming and development, but that's not really what was the focus of what I was doing. I was there to be a scientist, realized I hated it. So then I worked for a big law company out in Silicon Valley doing intellectual property prosecution. So doing basically patent law for a bunch of these like large companies out in Silicon Valley. And around the time I started focusing more on my own personal investments, and when I went ahead and did that, I started to get more involved in crypto. I guess I'd kind of held crypto since about 2015 or so, but I was a very small passive investor in it. At the time it was pretty much just Bitcoin and Ethereum, a couple others, but I was mostly just buying Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Sure.
And, they were passive assets. You held them and you hoped they went up. And in 2017, 18, they really didn't. But, it kind of improved. As the Ethereum blockchain sort of rolled out in, 2018, 2019, all of a sudden these very passive currencies became more active because they were buildable, right? We were deploying all these projects to the blockchain. So that sort of got me very interested, because now all of a sudden I could be a much more active investor, and I felt like I had a little bit more control over my finances, even though it's in DeFi, so it's not necessarily what you think of as controllable.
Yeah.
But once I started realizing you could read these smart contracts and start to look for investor risk, I realized that you could kind of hedge a little bit against the scams in the space. You could at least figure out what can and cannot happen to your funds within the confines of a smart contract. So I started doing that for my own personal investments. And then, a lot of other people wanted their contracts to be checked too. So we started doing that en masse. And we've just been slowly rolling out tools, education, security suite services, as investors have showed a need for it in the space. So we've just been kind of growing along as the space has demand for it.
Yeah, awesome. And I mean, I think when I first got into like crypto in general, like you were saying, it was more so on the passive side of things. But then when I really realized that there's that there was, well, something called DeFi, and you have these smart contracts, and you could kind of put your crypto assets to work for you. It was exciting, right? But that was also coupled with how insanely risky it is, because as a new user in DeFi, like years ago, like I had no idea what even a smart contract was. I didn't know how to read code. Um, I guess the premise of DeFi was that everything is verifiable on the blockchain. However, right, there's kind of an asterisk there, because not only does the team has to be trustworthy behind it, but also like there could be tons of backdoors in a potential contract or anything like that. But kind of touch on like the KYC process. What does that look like for you guys? And has it always been like the same process, or has it kind of grown over the years?
Yeah, like so many of the things that we've done, it's grown over the years because
Mhm.
decentralized finance changes so quickly. What's a hazard or a risk at one era is not necessarily a hazard or risk at another. So originally it was pretty simple. We were really just going in, we were kind of like vetting these teams, getting to know them, going over their documents. And it was more just like this kind of casual interview, almost like this right now, but with
Right.
showing of documents. But quickly we realized that we really needed to beef things up. So as we went, and we really saw a lot of failings in other people's KYC processes. So as we saw, some of these smaller providers you talked about in your intro come up and just have like really atrocious processes,
Yeah.
we started adding more layers into our own to really try and reduce the reputational hazard that comes with KYC. So we started kind of screening teams even before we would provide KYC services. So if we thought that, there might be more of a team risk, we didn't even really want their KYC data. It's like we
Sure.
think that you're just going to scam us anyways. So what's the point? And then we started to work more with traditional banking software. So with my law background, I was really big on compliance. I don't want to just run some half-baked shop.
Right.
So we
Right.
started working more with some of these bigger traditional finance KYC providers who are already doing these sorts of steps for credit cards and for other like larger institutions.
Mhm.
And they have pretty big databases. So they're able to like really scan through ID documents and do like these additional layers of security that really make sure that we're talking to the right people, and that the documents that we're handed to just show on a camera are the same as those that the person has from that country, so that everybody's ID matches.
Right. I think I
Um,
think I've even heard some things where, or some instances where people will just go and grab some guy off the street and sit him down in front of a computer and say, "Hey, I need you to say this," and they're like coaching this person, and they're KYCing somebody that's not actually like part of the team, right? Which is scary. Um,
yeah, that happens more often than you think, actually. And it's not necessarily just grabbing a random person off the street.
Mhm.
There's a pretty big, you can just hire people to do this off of
Sure.
Upwork and other similar websites, or Fiverr. So yeah, you get paid like $50 or something to just sit there and pretend that you're the founder owner of some like DeFi protocol to pass your KYC. That 100% happens, and that's why we really started. We need to see you on camera. We need to talk about you. We need to hear about the depth of information that you have on the project and make sure it matches the background you're telling us.
Yeah.
Your ID needs to match your face specifically, and that ID needs to be a legal, actual document in your country of origin. So we kind of have now worked through a process where we're checking all of it. We're doing these soft interviews that, then we kind of morph them into these more technical interviews where we're really making sure that you are who you say you are and you have detailed, in depth knowledge about the protocol you claim to be a part of.
Right.
And then we're coupling that with actual bank KYC software to verify that, like, the face we see is the ID from the place that you're telling us you're from.
Right. Now, as far as documents and things like that go, obviously you need ID. Is there other documents that you require of people when they're coming to KYC with you guys?
It depends. So sometimes we're asking to make sure that you have control of the contracts, which again is another way that we're sussing out that you are a part of the project. So we'll ask you
Mm.
to do a couple transactions on your deployer, or we'll have you interact with different layers or with another contract, or we'll have you talk to us on different chats to make sure that, again, you just haven't hired someone off Upwork, that we are talking to the person who we're expecting to be talking to.
Yeah.
So in terms of actual documentation, we're really just having them submit it to our KYC provider to actually deal with like the data storage and the validation element. But we do like to make sure just on screen that the face and the name match. So you need to show us a passport. Nothing else really works.
Sure.
Sometimes if you give us like 3 different types of ID, we'll accept like a driver's license, but really a
Yeah.
passport is what we're looking for. And yeah, then we're just really making sure that your story is straight, that you know what you're supposed to know, and that you have control over the contracts that you claim to have control over.
Right. And I think that's a really crucial component too, like doing test transactions from the deployer address to make sure that these are the people that are in charge. So that way you have information to take to, the authorities. And I guess that's a whole nother topic too, right? Like say you have somebody that comes on KYCs, does everything according to plan. Well, what happens if they just straight up hard rug? Like what is your guys' process internally? And I know that that's probably pretty elaborate because with different jurisdictions and people all around the country or all around the world rather, like there's different things that go on, right?
So I wouldn't say hard rug is usually the issue, because hard rug is just, the contract steals all the funds, right?
Right.
It's much more likely that the team is just going to kind of, like dump the tokens or do
Mm.
something weird with the token sale. Hard rug, we kind of hedge against, because even before we decide to take someone for KYC, we've already looked at their contracts
Sure.
usually. So we're making sure that the contract can't hard rug you. We're not going to KYC someone who has a highly risky contract. But in the case that there is a problem, and this has happened, that's when we do start to go up the ladder. We've established a good amount of relationships, usually through education, with different types of government agencies in the United States. So we have a pretty good working relationship with, different federal and state agents. So if something's gone wrong, that's when I'll usually package a little file up, and I'll say, this is what happened. These are the transactions that back up what I'm saying. We know that this is the person who's behind it. We'll try and alert like the centralized exchange that might be being used by the team to move funds around outside of DeFi into a bank. So we'll work with Avalanche, or we'll work with Binance, or we'll work with any one of these partners to try and like halt the movement of the funds. And then while we're doing that, we're compiling a document to give to, either a federal or a more local agency. In some of our more crazy jurisdictions, we'll figure out if we have a team member who knows someone in the region who can actually like go down to a precinct and like file a report and like actually give our document over to someone.
Sure.
We've done that before in Indonesia, actually. But ultimately, the best we can do is compile a report, give the information that we know, and it's really up to, the jurisdiction, like of what they're going to do with that, if they can do anything.
Sure. And when it comes to like, let's just say that I had a specific smart contract that I wanted to launch, and I come to do a KYC or approach you guys about doing a KYC, is there like a pass fail criteria? Like when you guys are doing the KYC, or do you guys have that kind of like figured out beforehand based on your guys's kind of like internal investigation before saying, yes, we'll go ahead and KYC you?
Yeah, so we'll usually, we initially get contacted by a team, and once they're started talking to us, we'll try and figure out like what is their project, what are they telling us it is, what contracts do they have out yet, and we're making sure that we're reviewing like a verified contract first before we accept the KYC. So again, we can kind of go through and make sure that there aren't these hard-coded scam elements in it. If we think that the team could be connected to, previous scam projects, and we've had this happen where, a serial scamming team has come to us for a KYC, we kind of like play around and we'll dig a bit into their history, and we're just like, no, we can tell for a specific reason that you look like the same team who did this scam. We're not going to KYC you. You're just going to go ahead and hurt your community. So it's not really a pass fail, but it's more, we have several layers of interviewing built in to try and figure out, what are they launching? Does that make sense? Is that thing safe? Is this team have a history, either good or bad? We try and figure out as much information as possible ahead before we go through and actually grant them a KYC.
Okay, got it. And I think my last question, and this may be kind of like off the cuff, but let's just say somebody is trying to figure out how to like properly vet projects for themselves. Do you have any
Mhm.
tips or any advice on, since obviously you've been in the space for some time now, do you have any advice for like those types of people that may not be as knowledgeable in what we're doing in crypto and DeFi?
Yeah, absolutely. In those cases, it's your money, right? At the end of the day, we
Mm,
can always give warnings to people that don't invest more than you can afford to lose. And of course, that's true. You really should, but people are going to invest anyways, and they're still going to hurt themselves if they lose.
yeah,
The best you can do instead is just be realistic and own what you don't know. So if you don't know how to scan smart contracts, go find someone who does. Actually understand as much as you can, by using partnerships. Maybe it is using a project like us, like RugDoc, to go ahead and like review your contracts to at least get the bare minimum out of the way. Educate yourself on the different types of things like KYC services because they're not all created equal. They're all very
right.
different, right? Some of these, one I actually came across a couple days ago because I was just clicking around on a project. And all you do is you pay them $500 and you upload your document on like a website. Like that's
Right.
it.
Yep.
There that is so easy to get around. So, really try and understand who these teams are. And maybe that is clicking around, finding the landing page, and actually starting to understand what the process for KYC is. Because you can
Yeah.
do that. You don't have to pay $500, but you can get an idea of what this process entails by just, essentially signing up to get a KYC and just getting to the point before you have to, exchange money. You can really understand their process.
Yeah.
Um, and then finally, it's really understand to the best of your ability, like, how is this team representing themselves? You know, and when they're pressed for things like, did you get an audit? Do you have KYC? Did you do anything before? Like, what's your history? Ask questions and be, open but critical about their answers.
Right.
Ideally, you want a team who has run other projects before. You want a team who's going to work with their investor community to make their investors feel safe. If you have a project who's not willing to do the bare minimum to make their investors feel safe, you might want to
Right.
reevaluate how much that potential win is. There's so many projects out there. You can
Mhm.
sit out on a couple. You can be picky. So be a picky investor. Don't like give in to your FOMO.
Right.
Ask the team.
And I think that something that's kind of weird that's going around in the DeFi space right now is that when projects are approached to KYC and they say, "Oh, well, we don't really see a need for a KYC of the team because," and this is their excuse, right? Because we like you've been rugged by people that have had a KYC before, and you still like nothing happened out of that. So really, does it matter that we KYC or not? Is that you know what I mean? So like, I feel like that's kind of a lazy excuse. Nowadays that's been going around by project developers, and then sure enough like they end up you know doing something nefarious. So
Oh, of
uh
course.
yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely like a really cheap way out, and you're going to see that from teams who are trying to be able to take a cheap and easy way out,
Yeah.
which is I'm saying be critical, Of course, is KYC or is an audit or is anything foolproof? No, it's not. But if a team is willing to work with their investor community to put in different layers, it becomes harder and harder to actually pull off a scam, or at the very least, it becomes, much more complicated because you had a team who instead of just launching a project, now they've had to coordinate an audit. Now they've had to coordinate a KYC. Now they've had to invest some of their funds to get all of these started. It
Right.
just becomes more less of an incentive to scam if you're already like getting these people to spend the time and resources. Again, it's not foolproof, but it's at least showing good faith on the
Right.
part of that team to do what their investors are
Right.
asking them to do.
And it's almost kind of like comical because some of the people that I've talked to here on the channel, they'll say, "Oh, well, SBF was KYC'd, and look what happened with FTX," right? But the reality is that we know who he is, and now he's facing like the charges and the legal like the legality behind it, right? Um, and for me, like I feel like that's better than not knowing anything about the team behind the project and then just them being able to either just take off with the funds because of a backdoor in a contract or otherwise, right? They're just dumping team tokens and then, you know how that goes, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. That's a thing. But really, I just encourage investors to educate themselves and to, you know, do some due diligence, understand what different types of audits look like, understand what different types of KYCs
Yeah.
entail. Um, Really, if you're going to be investing funds, you should be doing your diligence,
Yeah.
or at least finding out who can help you do your diligence.
100%. And I totally agree with you. But I won't take any more of your time. I just want to say thank you for coming here on the channel. I mean, I greatly appreciate it. I know that it's been we've kind of, it's taken a couple of days to get you here on the channel, but I'm super happy that we could sit down and kind of chat about this stuff, because I think that this is really like doing stuff like this where we're bringing on people that it's not, necessarily a new project in DeFi, right? But it's still educating people, getting them information, and hopefully leading them to a place where they can better invest their funds in crypto and like look out for common scams that might be coming down the pipeline. So again, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I'm happy to help. That's what I really do appreciate doing. I want to empower investors in the space to make the best decisions for themselves.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. Well, cool. Again, thank you so much, and we'll see you later, guys.
Great. See ya. Thank you for having me.
Yep.